Joe Biden has been president of the United States for, about a month and a half by the time of this video's publication? So, in one sense, it's a little silly to be giving him a job evaluation already, but on the other hand, he is an elected official, and we, by which I mean we Americans who are eligible to vote, sorry everybody else, have a right and a responsibility to keep track of and judge the progress of his administration, no matter how early on it might be. One area in which Biden has recently drawn some criticism is immigration. While he decried the cruelty of Donald Trump's immigration policies during the presidential campaign, it was recently reported that Biden's administration will be continuing one of the most harshly condemned aspects of Trump's immigration policy, the detention of children. And that's disappointing, but unaccompanied children do cross the border. That's a fact. When these children are found by federal agents, what's the alternative to detaining them? Is there one? And let's not forget that unaccompanied children aren't the only people crossing the border. What about adults? If detaining people apprehended after an unauthorized border crossing isn't the right thing to do, what is? It's important to ask these questions because too often the discourse around immigration reform in this country is reduced to either uncritical support of the current policy, however inhumane it might be, or well-intentioned but vague slogans like abolish ICE and shut down the camps. But it's also important to recognize that there are better answers to those questions than either the existing policies or the slogans. And luckily, you've got me, a guy with a YouTube channel, to tell you what those answers are. By sharing with you what I've heard from much, much better informed people. So, first things first, last week, this was the headline in the Washington Post. First migrant facility for children opens under Biden. The story goes on to report how an emergency detention facility in Carrizo Springs, Texas, has been reopened to house up to 700 unaccompanied migrant children between the ages of 13 and 17. That pissed a lot of people off, with good reason. The thought of a detention facility for migrant children quite easily evokes memories of the family separations that occurred under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, one of the most shameful occurrences during a presidency composed of practically nothing but shameful occurrences. Reversing Trump-era immigration policies and repairing the damage they did was something Biden repeatedly vowed to do. But as Linda Brandmiller, an immigration lawyer quoted in the Washington Post story, puts it, reopening the Carrizo Springs facility is unnecessary, it's costly, and it goes against absolutely everything President Biden promised he was going to do. Adding to the concerns of immigrant rights activists is the fact that because it is being classified as a temporary rather than permanent detention center, the Carrizo Springs facility will not be subject to state licensing requirements. A spokesperson for the Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees the facility, insists that it will exceed all relevant standards, but even so, the fact that we can truthfully utter the sentence, the Biden administration is opening an unlicensed detention center for migrant children, doesn't fill one with confidence that we're moving in the right direction, does it? Well, after news of the Carrizo Springs facility reopening broke, the American Civil Liberties Union released a statement, and I think that's a good place to start our considerations of what to do about this problem. The ACLU statement, which was issued by Noreen Shah, Senior Advocacy and Policy Counsel, reads, "While we recognize the Biden administration's efforts to process unaccompanied children in a responsible way that addresses public health needs and prioritizes children's safety, it is critical that it not repeat the mistakes of the Trump administration. The administration must ensure the physical and mental health needs of children are met and that they are united with their sponsors in the community without unnecessary delay. We urge the Biden administration to provide full transparency and accountability for these temporary shelters. Independent organizations and lawyers must have access to monitor them. They must be run by responsible, nonprofit providers. and they must be closed as soon as public health permits. Profiteers must not be allowed to exploit the situation. Note that the statement does not simply demand that the Carrizo Springs facility be closed. That's important. I think any serious attempt to address the failures of American immigration policy has to acknowledge the fact that we're dealing with serious, long-standing problems. And problems like that can't be fixed with the issuing of an executive order or even the passage of a single piece of legislation. Fixing problems like this takes time. That means we need to set goals for the short term as well as the long term. In this case, I think the long-term goals are probably easier to agree on, though they're also more difficult to actually achieve. Long-term, I think most of us progressive-minded folk agree that facilities like Carrizo Springs should be greatly reduced in number, maybe even eliminated altogether if possible. I say if possible because I don't know if it is possible. As long as unaccompanied children are crossing the border, it's going to be necessary for the government to house them until they can be moved into a more permanent home. Whether that housing has to take the form of a facility like Carrizo Springs, or it would be feasible someday to just transport unaccompanied minors directly to places that look and operate more like group homes while they're being processed, I don't know. But it seems like just leaving unaccompanied children to fend for themselves after they cross the border is not the most responsible option. I will say, as long as detention facilities for unaccompanied children are necessary, I'd prefer they be more like the one in Carrizo Springs. It's clean, the living conditions seem excellent, there's a school, residents are given access to legal services. It's way better than the ICE camps we were all horrified by during the Trump administration. ICE camps which still exist, by the way, and I'll get to those in a bit. But even though the Carrizo Springs facility is good for what it is, that doesn't mean it's perfect. As the ACLU statement says, it's not enough that the health and safety of the children housed there be taken care of. The facility itself must be accessible to independent inspectors who can ensure that things are on the up and up. And it must be operated with the welfare of the children as the top priority, not profiteering. Thinking long-term, such facilities, when they are needed, should no longer be located in, as the Washington Post article says, far-flung locations away from public view. Detention centers that are placed out in the middle of nowhere should be closed and replaced with facilities much closer to communities where they can be scrutinized and held accountable. And that goes for adult detention facilities as well as those exclusively for children. Last year, Congressman Pramila Jayapal drafted a resolution called the Roadmap to Freedom, which summarizes the problems with the current immigration system and proposes a series of reforms, including establishing a presumption of liberty for all immigrants. That means ending mandatory detention of undocumented immigrants apprehended after crossing the border. Many people who cross the border have relatives or sponsors already here who are ready to receive them and help them get set up with a place to stay. So it's unnecessary to incarcerate them while they're waiting for a hearing in their immigration case. And as for those who arrive without family or sponsors in place to help them out, surely there is a better way to deal with them than to simply lock them up in overcrowded, poorly monitored ICE camps. I have a suggestion. First, as the ACLU called for last year, family detention centers run by ICE should be closed as soon as possible. In fact, I think we should end long-term detention of all apprehended migrants, families, single adults, children, everybody. Crossing the border illegally is a civil violation, not a criminal one, so it's unnecessary and unacceptable to incarcerate undocumented immigrants for months or years as ICE currently does. Bring them in, process them, let them know when and where their day in court is, and let them go. For people who don't have anywhere to go, instead of leaving them in law enforcement custody indefinitely, transfer them to an HHS facility like the Children's Detention Center at Carrizo Springs. But, and this is a crucial detail and another reason why it's important for these facilities to be located near civilization and not way the hell out in the middle of the goddamn desert, people housed in such places should be free to come and go as they please. Give them a room, a bed, a shower, 3 square meals a day, access to educational and recreational facilities, legal services. But if they want to take the kids into town for the day or whatever, they're allowed to go and do that and come back. And when they find a more permanent place to stay outside the facility, let them go. Yes, I'm saying the federal government should spend our tax dollars giving undocumented immigrants and asylum seekers who come here and don't have places to stay. And if you're concerned about how much that's going to cost, don't be. Because the good news is, since ICE won't be operating concentration camps anymore, we can slash the hell out of its budget, which should pay for a lot of this. Actually, that wouldn't technically be true. The agency that replaces ICE will have a much smaller budget and far more limited responsibilities, because I do think we should abolish ICE. Last year, ProPublica reported on a systemic sexual assault problem at an ICE detention facility. A month after that report was published came accusations of forced sterilizations of immigrants at another ICE facility. Plus, for years, there have been reports linking ICE officers to white supremacists and detailing fascist statements made by ICE officers. And just last month, it was reported that ICE had defied an order by President Biden to halt deportations, making it essentially a rogue agency. So, yeah, abolish ICE, get rid of it, fire everybody, and rebuild a new agency from the ground up responsible for finding and deporting the relatively small number of undocumented immigrants who are actually dangerous criminals, and leave the rest alone. Let Customs and Border Protection handle apprehending and processing people who cross the border without authorization. And by the way, clean out and rebuild that agency too, because it's also full of racists and abusers, apparently. I'd also like to see more official border crossings established and policy changed to make it easier for people to enter the country legally, especially those who are seeking asylum, so that there will be less of a need to apprehend and process people who cross the border outside of an official checkpoint. And let's not forget the millions and millions of undocumented immigrants currently living in the United States. We should confer legal resident status on all of them and establish a path to citizenship for all of them who want it. Many undocumented immigrants have lived in this country for years, decades. They've worked, paid taxes, raised children, contributed to our society in countless ways that benefit all of us, regardless of where we were born, how we got here, or how long we've been here. This is their home, and it's a long past time we allowed them to feel at home here. Basically, make it easier for people to come here legally, stop treating people like criminals when they are found to have come here illegally, and provide food, clothing, and shelter to those who come here when they need it for as long as they need it, without forcing them to endure long-term involuntary detention, and grant legal status to all undocumented immigrants who are here already. Can all of that be accomplished overnight? No. It will take time. And it will require congressional as well as executive action. But that is the direction we should be going. And we should start moving in that direction right now. What can you do to help us get moving? Well, if you've been watching this series, you know what I'm going to say. Contact your member of Congress and your senators. Ask them what their position is on immigration reform. Tell them you support a path to citizenship for the undocumented immigrants currently here. Tell them you support making it easier for people to come here legally. Tell them you want them to abolish ICE, but don't just throw a slogan at them. Tell them why. Because of the human rights abuses, because of the ties to white supremacy, because of the disregarding of presidential orders, and because treating all migrants who cross the border without authorization like criminals and incarcerating them is wrong. Beyond pestering your elected representatives, you can support organizations that are fighting every day to protect the rights of immigrants, to hold the government accountable for its policies, and to push for better, more just and humane immigration laws and practices. You can donate to the ACLU, which has been very active in fighting for the rights of undocumented immigrants. You can support groups like the National Immigration Law Center, the Immigrant Defense Project, or the Immigration Justice Campaign, which oppose mass incarceration of immigrants and help to find legal representation and provide other necessary resources for undocumented immigrants and their advocates. All of these groups I just mentioned are linked in the description of this video. And if you live in a community where there are local groups working to support undocumented immigrants, support those groups. As with so many other problems we face, while the federal government has a very important role to play, often local action can be the most immediately effective. We Americans like to say that we're a nation of immigrants. That's true, but for that to really mean something, we need to guarantee fair treatment for all immigrants, documented and undocumented alike, who are here already and who are coming here every day. We shouldn't be treating them like criminals, locking them up and abusing them. We should be protecting their rights, providing those who are in need with what they need, and welcoming them home.